some things that you'll come to learn about me in the next few days.
All right, this comes after we learned that Jordan Willis, the host of the party, checked himself into rehab. He is not currently facing any charges, but should they be? What does this tell you?
As Lauren said, we have to wait for the official report to come out, and one of the side effects is making a person sleepy. And what happened here, I think, could have been that the four of them used it together. The one fellow who comes in and sleeps on the couch indoors sleeps it off.
2 days.
For a while, more than 24 hours, right? Whereas the other three get sleepy and pass out outside, and because of the weather and because of the snow, their body temperature drops very quickly from 98 degrees to 80 degrees, at which point, less than an hour, the heart can't beat anymore accurately, so they die of a cardiac arrest due to hyperthermia. It is very unusual for 4 people using together to die simultaneously from.
We can all agree that when a family is going through the grieving process, they are liable to say some things that they don't necessarily mean. And generally within our society, we tend to give those individuals a pass. But what is the limit here? When is enough enough? The situation surrounding the passing of Clayton, Ricky, and David had us all questioning things, because the idea that something like this could happen and there's no foul play involved doesn't sit right with anybody. And the family was pouring out on social media asking for help, asking for pressure, and that is exactly what they got from a lot of people, to include myself. But when the toxicology report came out, I thought a lot of this was settled, but that doesn't quite seem to be the case. And a lot of us thought it was odd that Jordan Willis's attorney couldn't get his story straight. And the fact that he couldn't get his story straight made things sound a whole lot more suspicious than what they were. Well, the family isn't seeming to get their story straight either. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And if an open conversation is something you prefer, then this is the place for you. Welcome to The Point, so let's talk about it.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Now, the idea that 3 individuals can pass away in somebody's backyard and not be noticed by the homeowner is absolutely absurd to me. And it was absurd to a lot of y'all as well. And did the family's statements not seem to add both fuel and fire to a lot of the speculation? But when the toxicology report came out and Dr. Baden made his statement on Fox News, I think a whole lot of us were saying, okay, this makes sense. This explains what happened to them, and it can explain what happened to Jordan and why he didn't notify authorities and why he seemed to be very confused about the situation as the police were arriving. But now I'm seeing on my news feed that certain members of the family are saying that Jordan's the mad scientist. He's the chemist. He made something, and now that is what happened. And I am asking y'all, have y'all not noticed the change in this story? Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I understand the story, a fiance of one of those 3 victims found those individuals after she broke into Jordan Willis's home, and then she notified authorities. Now, the attorney gets on there and says that Jordan was very good friends with these 3 and he wouldn't do anything to harm his buddies. But then the family gets on TV and does interviews and says, well, we've never heard of this guy. We don't know who he is. So how is he really good friends with these 3 if none of us have ever heard of him? And why did he not call authorities? It's been a couple days. He should have seen something. He was aware of it and he's hiding things. And then you get the speculation within the online community and they say, well, they were probably all 3 doing something. And it's because they were all doing some type of illegal substances. That explains why they passed. And then the family once again says, well, none of these individuals did any substances. We don't know them to be a user of any type, so that story's ridiculous. Clearly they were slipped something without their knowledge. And around that same time, it is also discovered that Jordan Willis is a scientist, and apparently a pretty prominent scientist. So then you have family members get on there and say, well, we've never heard of Jordan at all. But one of the girlfriends says what she has heard hasn't been good. She has heard that Jordan was a user, but there's no way that any of these 3 individuals did any type of substances. Well, now you got the toxicology report that comes out. And as that toxicology report comes out, just like Dr. Baden said, it fully explained a very rational scenario for what happened. They all happened to possibly partake in some nose candy. That also happened to have something mixed with it. It would be that drastic temperature change in conjunction with the slowed heart rate that would cause Ricky, David, and Clayton to succumb to some type of cardiac event and ultimately pass. So they did not pass from the substances. They did pass from hypothermia caused by the substances. And while Jordan's checked into rehab, family members once again get on television and say, okay, they found something in their system, but it had to be slipped to them. They would not willingly or knowingly take these things. So it had to be Jordan who slipped it to him, because now he's checked into rehab, and since he's checked into rehab, that's suspicious to us. But to top it all off, there now have been reports that Jordan Willis was known as the chemist in high school. And this is where I'm getting a lot of red flags here. So how do we go from the fact that nobody knows who this guy is, nobody's heard of him, to now he is well known as the chemist in high school, the guy who makes things, the guy who can concoct stuff to make you feel better? None of this is making any sense at this point. You either knew him at the beginning or you didn't. You can't say at the very beginning of the story that none of y'all have ever heard of this guy, to now not only have you heard of him, you knew him back in high school, and he was known as the party guy. At some point, the grieving statements do need to stop. Just because a family member of yours has passed in a tragic and heartbreaking way, it doesn't give anybody a free pass to just speak anything to the public as if it's a fact. I was under the impression, and it was completely rational, to think that the reason Jordan didn't notify authorities sooner is because he was completely looped out of his mind. And as he was coming to, he was still out of it and probably not fully aware. And the reason he hired an attorney was because he didn't want it necessarily known that he had a substance problem. Because keep in mind, he has a job. Not only does he have a job, he has a job where he is a data scientist. He is a doctor. And he hired that attorney probably to mitigate a lot of the backlash that he would end up facing. But what I'm asking is, when we see a scenario where family members are constantly changing a story, does it not discredit the victims? Does it not discredit the overall case? What we all do want is justice. But are we allowed now to just throw rampant speculation out there as facts if we're a grieving family member? I do believe somebody should be held accountable. I'm not up here saying nobody should have any charges here. I'm not buying the idea that there is no foul play involved. Somebody sold them that stuff, and that person should be held accountable. But to constantly have storylines pop up in my newsfeed with some other theory that contradicts everything else they have said doesn't quite make sense. Now, if you see any of these things differently, you can let me know down in the comments below. Other than that, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. Y'all stay safe. I'll catch you in the next one.